Hi there guys, Gary here for GMVFX recording you a brand new tutorial. This is not the first time I've recorded this is now the second time this has been recorded, and the last one basically died a death, which is a real shame. So I'm going to do this as quickly as I can, which you'll probably be very pleased about. Today we're talking about command line rendering, and there are several tutorials that I found online that show you how to do this by dragging and dropping a piece of text that leads directly to the Blender render object, which actually basically is just the blender.executable, and then you put it in a Windows shell, hit return, and it renders that one scene, which is all well and good if you want to render one thing, but it's not very useful if you want to render more than one. So I'm going to show you a cleaner, more streamlined process to actually do that right now. Now, I've got a little scene here in Blender 3.00, and basically it's 30 frames of a bouncing ball. If I just play this, okay, right, simple as that. That's it, just a bouncing ball, and it's running at 30 frames per second. So it's nice and fast and nice and clean, and I'm going to render it out to a folder here. And if you look at it, my path is GMVFX tuts 053 renders settings, which is what this tutorial is basically all about, and a folder called renders, and I'm going to go accept. So all my stuff is in here. It's rendering as PNGs with an alpha channel. It's only an 8-bit depth. It doesn't have to be fast. It doesn't have to be clever, sorry, it just has to be fast. So we've also got our render settings set to Eevee. So if I render a single frame of this, if we just go to rendering, and I just go render an image up here, boom, it's going to be quick, which is really good. Now, it just means it's good for us for the example. It could be something that you set off, which is like 2 minutes a frame, or 3 minutes a frame, or 5 minutes a frame, or whatever, and then you can set off something else afterwards directly in a list, and in what we call a batch file. You know what a batch file is. If you don't, basically it's a series of very simple commands which repeat one line after the other. You can put in comments. You can also blank out lines by essentially commenting them out. And it just sits on a folder, and when you click on it, it runs. However, if you open up a command shell and then you go dir to get to where that file is, if you then type the name of the file, directly making sure it's visible in regards to the folder by putting a period and a backslash, and then the name of the file, it will pick up each line of that file and render the contents one after another, which is wonderful if you've got a bunch of stuff that you want for the following morning rather than just one scene, which is when you drop the file directly into one folder. So we're going to go through the motions here, and trust me, I'm going to do this as fast as I can. So let's go back just out of here to our layout. It doesn't really matter. And I'm going to open up a command shell. Now that's a Windows PowerShell. I've just hit the button up there because I have it pinned to my startup taskbar. Startup taskbar, what am I talking about? And I'm going to type in the word here, Blender. Now, what does that do? It doesn't do anything. But we need that to be recognizable. I don't want to have to keep on typing in the whole path for it to actually find the executable Blender. So how can we do that? Well, this actually is really, really simple, but it's very, very clever. If you go into Windows, we want to get up environment variables. You hit the Windows key, and if you type in env, which is essentially a shortcut for the environment variables, it brings up exactly what you want. Edit the system environment variables. And when I say environment variables, what I mean basically is if you've got something which you're going to use all over the place, you want to be able to get a pathway to it really quickly. Well, with the environment variables, every time we open a new Windows PowerShell, it'll go, oh, the word Blender. I'm going to look down the path structure that's in our environment variables, look for that command, and if I find it, I will run it. So they haven't got to put in any more path, none of this C, program files, Blender Foundation, rah, 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 to find it. No, you go to environment variables, and up here in the user variables for yourself, you will find path. Now this is the user that we're in. In your user, it'll be the same. And if we click edit here on path, you'll see it's just come up with pointing from the user profile, which is yourself, app data, local Microsoft window apps. Now we want a new one which points at the Blender folder. So click on new, and now go browse. And then if you just go through this PC, C drive, program files, Blender Foundation, Blender 3, open up 3, no don't, just Blender 3 and go OK. And now that, if I go OK there, that's basically put that into our path. So if I now go here, click on path and go edit, it's there. It's not going away. I'm going to go OK here and OK here. And in theory, it's done. But the problem is it will only do it when you open up your file again, open up your Windows PowerShell again. So if I type in Blender here now, nothing will happen again. So if I just close that and then reopen it by hitting on the PowerShell button here, you can also go here and just type in PowerShell. You'll see it there. Have I typed something wrong? I have. Everything like power. Yes, there we go. Just I've written powers. That's enough to make it visible there. Windows PowerShell. It's basically a command prompt. So now in this new window, if I type in Blender and hit return, it actually finds it and opens it. So isn't that fantastic? You can actually open it from the command line. That's really useful. But if I don't want to open it in the command line, I want to open it. Sorry, what if I want to open it in the command line? Let me get that straight. If I want to open it in the command line, I don't want it to run in the foreground. I want it to run in the background. That would be using the term Blender -B. And now that basically means that it will open it in the background, and you can see there it's opened it in the background, but it hasn't done anything in the front here. It's now open, but I don't want to open. So I'm going to press Control C and Control C again, and we're back, and it's totally fine. That's Blender. So this is now all set up for us to render. So now we're going to very, very quickly create our very first BAT file. Now I've got a BAT file here that I use quite a bit. I'll just show it to you briefly. If I open it, and we can go through. No, I didn't want to do that. I've opened it. That means it was starting to render. Excuse me. I'm edit it. So I'm going to go edit. Now you can edit it if you want to in a standard text file, but be warned. If you're building something in a text file, you've got to make sure the format that it goes out as, that you save it as, is not going to be a text, but it will be basically all files, and then you can save it as a BAT. Sometimes when you do that, you save that, and it goes, that's already there. No, it doesn't. Sometimes what it does is it puts the .txt on the end, so do make sure you've set it to all files before you go and try and save it. But what I'm going to do here, I'm just going to make this a little bit, I'm just going to pop this open, because I was using this for rendering something in the last one. So if I just make this text bigger, let's make this bigger so you can see it. Okay, right. So there is a few little bits of information that you have to put in here, and let me just get rid of this one, just to stop things from being too difficult to understand. There we go. What we have here is a little bit of text at the beginning, which is accented out. So this in the script that basically a batch file runs on Windows machine, this here, these two semicolons, no, these two colons, sorry, they are comments that mean that whatever I've got written here, it just pays no attention to it. So that's really useful for if you want to put more information. So if I wanted to put, say, urgent files, that's not going to write that, but I've got it there. So I'll know that these ones are all urgent. The @echo off that you see on the next line below, after the gap, not that the gap is necessary, that's purely there for making everything a bit more readable. That -echo off means anything that's here or anything else down after this particular line, it won't repeat the line out inside of the Windows PowerShell. So it just stops things from writing themselves. And I'm just going to get rid of that rem there for a second, because as you can see on this line, what we have here is Blender -B. So this is actually our command all the way down to the bottom of here. It's only just traveling into the next line because the font is bigger. This will all be on one line. It's nice and simple. So it's Blender -B, and then this here is where our actual blend file is. So the point of that is we have a complete path where our project is. We have a complete path for where our scene is. That's really handy because you don't have to have this piece of script anywhere other than your desktop. It will always call Blender, which is great because we know it will, and then it'll always find the correct folder in the right place. And the best thing is that once it's finished rendering this, you have got basically, this is just a file that you can save and look at and go, right, where was that UV project? Oh, it was here. And it's almost like having a log of your renders, which I find really handy. Blender -B from the background and gentuts, blah, 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 blah. So basically the path and the file to the path all in one. -O, which is for outputting. And that comes down to here. So this was basically rendering out the citadel that you saw in the last tutorial. And GenVFX tuts 052 project paint into a renders folder rather than into the scene, rather than the scene folder, which everything sits in. And then I've got here / even citadeli.###. Now, when you're rendering, that's actually really quite useful. You can type this, by the way, with the 4 hashes or any number of hashes you want into Blender's actual render output setting, where it normally says \temp. And what those 4 hashes do, by the way, because this is really quite useful, is it makes sure that whatever you render, it gives you 4 padded numbers. So it'll go citadeli.0001. And if it's 100 frames, the last one will be 0100. So it means that when you're looking at the files in the render folder where they sit, it's nice and tidy. Then after that, we have -F, which is file format. And that's -file format open EXR multilayer, because I was using all the layers in there for comping. So I need to be sure that actually that was there, because sometimes I might not have put that in the actual project. It could just be still set to PNG. So as a rule, I tend to put that on. So it forces it to go to the multi-layer. -A, which means animation, which is basically our render flag in essence. And -T for, and that says only use 4 threads. Because if it's rendering it quickly, you only need 4 threads. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to edit this, but I'm not going to edit it in here. I'm going to edit it in what I prefer to edit it in, and that is Sublime. It's Sublime Text. It's very, very good. I will say it's free. Yeah, there is a paid for version, but you can. It's not registered yet, so you can use it for a period of time, and then if you're happy with it, you can pay for it. In fact, I am going to buy it because it is great. So what I've got here is, in fact, our actual one that I'm going to be pointing to. So I'm going to go away from that, and let's open this up here, and I'm going to remove these lines here. So all I've got right now is the one below. So I can, if you can see that, I'm just going to see if I can make the text a little larger just to make it easier. I'm trying to remember where I do that. I'm not sure I can. Can I make the text larger? Someone tell me, can I make the text larger? You'll probably find it in syntax. No, I'm leaving that. That's absolutely correct. Spell check dictionary. No. I don't think I can. Or can I? Tab size 4? No. Tab width 5? No. Well, no matter. Let's carry on regardless. So here's my command line, and I'm going to get rid of all of that, and then we'll do it properly as I would do. So Blender -B. That's it. That's the command. That'll do it. Opens up in the background, and I need to point it at my balloon file. So we need to find out where the balloon file is, and the best way to do that is to go into your scene, and you can see up here it's got GenTuts 053 render setting scenes ball bounce.blend. Okay, so I want to actually pick that path, so I'm going to go File, Save As, and that brings up that file scene. It brings up the scene there, so I can just go Control-C in there, go back to Sublime Text, go Control-V, so that's put that into there. And then just to be sure, we want ball bounce.blend, so I'll select that down there, Control-C, and I'll go back up here to, oh, no, not there, to the Sublime Text, and go Control-V. So that will now, in theory, if I put -A on the end of that, that will render my scene, everything with all my settings in. However, I've got that in my actual scene, if you'll notice, and this is another really useful thing here. I've got this in my scene. It's actually, if we cancel this and go to here, and we have a look at the output, it's got them going directly into the renders folder. Now that means it'll put my 30 images in that folder. I don't want to do that. I want to put them inside of a folder in there. Now this again is this is something which is, I'm not sure whether it happens with most of the software. I found that it doesn't always do this with software. If I put -O, and I'll copy this part here, Control C, and then Control V. So I've got GenVFX Tuts 053 render settings. If I type in renders, I think that was the folder. Let's just double check. Renders, yes. And then I put in slash, and I'm going to put BB for ball bounce, and I put another slash, and then I'll put ball bounce dot ash. That means that if that folder isn't there, it will just make it, which is wonderful. When I found that out, I was so chuffed, because it's so often that you think, well, what if I want to render this and I want to put it in another folder? So I've got a different version that's of a different scale, because that's something you see. You can actually set the size of the renders as well. Well, I'll just make a new folder, and it just does it here. I'm going to open up the scene again. I'm going to refix the size. You can just render it again, different size, different folder. So that's that part there. And I'm going to. It's only 30 frames. I want it to do. I want to do say 1 to 25 of them. So I'm going to go -S1, which means minus start one. -E 20. Actually, let's make it 27, just be on the safe side. 27, yeah. So that starts at frame 1, ends at frame 27, which is good because you can dictate exactly what frame range you want to render. So if you've got a shot that's longer than you need it to be, and you only need a small section of it to render, you can do that. Excuse me. And then, well, what's the other thing? Well, let's say I only want to use 4 threads. -T, 4. There you go. And in theory, that does everything I need for this particular one. Now, what I can do is I can go to a new line. I'm going to copy it over all of that. Go Control C, go to new line, Control V, not B. And I'm going to just very quickly, I'm going to make this BB2. I'm going to make it ball bounce 2. And I'm going to set this one, I'm going to force this with -F to open EXR. All the settings, by the way, for all of this are in a directory which I will put in the scene description of this tutorial. The scene description? That's because I'm using so many different pieces of software now. That's something completely different. I will put it in the description. As I said. So I think open EXR is the correct one. And I'm going to set that to also, in fact, let's do that to the 30 frames. -A. So I've just got 2 lines in there, and I'm going to save this as, and let's go to my desktop, and let's save it as ren_blender.bat and go over that. Yeah, might as well. And now let's just minimize this, and this is where we find out that I've got it all wrong. But if we open up Sublime Editor, push Sublime Editor so we can just see it, just to be sure we've got everything correct. Looks like it to me. Ball bounce 2, 2, 2. Yeah, okay, fine. So I need to now get myself, I've opened this window, but it just looks at users Gary because it's my user Gary account. So how do I quickly get to where my render blender.bat is? Well, what you do is you go CD desktop, or you can press CD desk and then hit the tab key and it will auto complete. So that takes me to my desktop. Now if I type in a PowerShell, you can use Unix commands, or you can use PC commands. So if I wanted to show the directory on a PC, I'd press dir, which is fine. If I press ls, which is just list, it also does the same thing. So it does multiple. The PowerShells are great. I wish I knew more about them. I'm learning more as I go along, obviously, like most people are. But they're still pretty good. Now I can see there I've got 2 files. I've got blender render.bat and I've got ren_blender.bat. So I see my blender render one is for I was using for the previous UV projects thing. But really and truly, let's just say I should be using just this one, Ren Blender. Now, so I want to run Ren Blender, so I type ren underscore blender, and I'll hit tab. Now, when I do the tab, it auto completes it, and it also puts, you noticed, same as it did when I pressed desktop before, the tab for desktop, it puts a dot and a backslash. What that means is, in this folder, I want you to run this. So it's very, very specific. It also means that if you have something in that folder which is the same as a command, it won't try and do the command. It will just run that folder, that file. Okay, right, so I'm going to hit go on this. There you go. And now that will open up Blender in the background, and it will navigate to the scene that we want, and it will start to render it. And there you go. That's frame 1, frame 2, frame 3. So it's rattling through every single one of those frames, and it's putting those, because Eevee, nice and fast, and it's pushing them into our folder. So let's go to our render folder, and here you can see already there's a folder in here called BB, and I'm just going to do that and click on that, and you'll notice there it did a Blender quit. Once it finished rendering, it was a Blender quit. So I'm going to open this, but I'm going to use a piece of software that I think everyone should actually have on their machines if they're rendering, and it is called View, DJ View. So let's open with, and I'm going to go choose another app because it's not in there, but I have got it in there, and here it is, djview.exe. I'm going to go open. The other one, by the way, is just finished rendering. So there we go. So that's now playing back my sequence of PNGs of the first ones. And then if I go back into renders, we've got BB2, and you'll see here I've got ball bounce EXR. So it's the same sequence, but also you'll notice it's cleaner, which is a little bit weird. It looks cleaner. It's not. The other one, this is actually just viewing the alpha better. I don't think there's any layers in here, or did I put any layers in? Because one of the great things about this is you can see the layers. So there's only one set of layers, but we just rendered out the RGB and the alpha. But DJ View is really good for that. And so yeah, there you go. You've got one set of render, another set of renders, and then here's your command line. And then if you're done and you think, right, okay, I don't need to render those now, that's fine. Don't get rid of the lines. Just go REM and space in front of the line. And what that basically does is it's the same as commenting it out, but it means it's not totally omitted. It's just saying, don't view this, but keep it there. Be aware of it. This is saying pay no utter attention to anything that's written after those two colons. So that's pretty much it. And the best thing, as I say, about it is that, you know, you've got your next job and it comes in, you know, you just go, right, well, let's pop that down there. It's gone right behind it, hasn't it? There you go. I'll pop that down there, and I'll go blah, 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 and it's like file name and output and my file format and my frame range and the amount of processors to use. But you can still see the other ones you did in there. It's great. It's a much more sensible way to do command line rendering, and I thoroughly recommend it. One of the best things as well, of course, is when you finished your project, whatever you're working on, you can take that little script and you can copy it, or you can move it into your top of your project. So you've always got that list for when you're archiving your project up. Right, I hope that's been of some use to you. As I say, bit of a quick one, but really, really useful. Listen, guys, you take care of yourselves, and we'll see you on the next one. Take care, bye.